I started playing the Scandinavian 20 years ago, and in this video, Grandmaster Max Illingworth, will share my experience playing this opening. Let's dive right in, starting with a game I played against another junior player at the time, Justin Huang, in the Australian Junior Masters 2005, with a slightly different order of moves. I just played the usual set that I knew at the time, and my opponent played this 94, just wanting to double up my pawns. I think if I had this position again, I probably would play a move such as Queen d5 and pressure the center. But instead, I played the move Queen to c7. I kind of knew that was always going to be a decent square for my queen. And yeah, objectively speaking, White probably has a big advantage if they do play the right moves, but instead he kind of allowed me to get some active piece play, kind of in the style of the Bronstein-Larsen system. Admittedly, Bishop d6, bit of a wasted tempo. I kind of realized later I should just be going full on castling. But yeah, in the end, I was kind of able to get a decent enough position. Like the move a4 is also probably a little bit out of place, where I was a bit surprised that my opponent wasn't just castling the king. And yeah, c5 probably not that great a move objectively, but in the end, I was kind of able to take this position it objectively is very bad, but was sort of able to kind of turn around where after b4, my opponent just missed a very nice move of queen c4 that sort of allowed me to take back the initiative, and I ultimately went on to win thanks to a nice little trick of queen d4 and just picking off the pawns and winning the game. And actually, this was a tournament I played the Australian Junior Master in 2005, which was basically the worst tournament of my life. Like, I lost nearly every single game I played there, and this was my only win was with the Scandinavian. So you can understand I had some good memories of the opening as a result of that, and so we can now move on to a game I played in 2016. Unfortunately, I kind of lost my score sheets from like 2003 to 2007, where my family unfortunately threw them out while I was overseas. But I can share with you this game I played in 2016 against a 900 rated player, Cameron Young, in the Begonia Open of 2016 in Ballarat. And this 97 approach is one that I do cover in my course, Play the Strongest Scandinavian, in 2025. And also something I do need to mention about that, it's less than 24 hours left until my launch for this concludes, meaning that right now you can get it for just $97, but the price will be going up to $147 plus by the end of March 12th, California time. So do make sure to get that if you see this video in time, just to make sure that you don't miss out. I'll put the link in the description, by the way, so you can see it there. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure, to at least share like one video, just like sharing my personal experiences, like the story of how I think Scandinavian went from being, an opening that, was sort of a bit difficult for me to play to one that actually became one of my very best weapons against e4. Now, as I've shown in some past videos, if black gets in b5, you get some pretty good Benko style compensation like this. So my opponent played bishop d7. I played the move bishop takes. I probably would take back with the queen now if I had a choice, but yeah, in the game I went for this, and I'll show the game relatively quickly, like there are a lot of games to get through, actually 17, that I have prepared just for this video, and that doesn't include the subsequent parts I've planned. But yeah, we can see my opponent's move queen e2, it surprised me a little bit, but I just knew that if I develop my piece as quickly as possible, that I would get quite good compensation for the pawn. And so after d6, I kind of found this cool move where I didn't just automatically take back the pawn, but I played this little tricky move of rook e8, just lining up that rook against the queen. And my opponent here made a bit of a mistake as well with long castling, where now their king is quite exposed. And let me ask you this, what do you think is the best way for black to play in this position? Can you find a move that I played that set up my eventual victory against a player rated 1912? And if you are relatively new to the channel, by the way, do make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can get more videos like this one. That was your chance, to pause if you wanted more time to figure out the puzzle, but the answer is that the move of b5 is very strong. We just use that c-pawn as a hook to get at the king. My opponent played knight f3, and I decided to be a bit tricky and play move as c5 just to, create so much pawn tension that my opponent would just simply collapse. I think nowadays I'd probably just take on c4, and just open up the lines to the king, but in the game, my opponent kind of fell apart a little bit, where I was able to attack his knight, also threaten bishop f5, threaten also the pawn on a2 if they move the knight. And with knight g4, white's defense just kind of falls apart. We end up losing the exchange, but the result, was not really in doubt, and my opponent did resign after some more moves, as you can see here. So, very nice little example of how to play from Black's point of view. And also do like the video if you are enjoying it, by the way, just so I know to do more like this one. With that, we're going to move on to the third game I have to share. And these next games, by the way, are now online games. I'm going to be showing mostly games I played on Chess24 and later on Chess.com. Because something you might not know about me is that from the year 2017 to about, I think it was 2020 or so, I was basically the highest rated blitz player on Chess24. And that was ahead of a lot of GMs as well, in fact. And in this game against Duty 23 on Chess24, my opponent plays this knight f3 move order, to which I play the move bishop g4, just not making it so easy for white to successfully keep the pawn on d4, because we got a lot of ways to target it, like I showed in my video of this opening sub destroys players below 2,200. So I had short castles, long castles. Before I get into knight c3, there is actually a very fun idea that I discovered earlier today of meeting h5 with h5, h3 of h5 for a very interesting fishing pole style attack. And that's something that, if you get my course Play Strongest Scandinavian 2025, you will see the details on that. But just wanted to share that as a little bit of a freebie before getting into how the game actually played out. Now, I think about this position as black, I might actually play Queen a5 with the idea of going for that h5 kind of fishing pole attack that I mentioned before, but I didn't know of this idea when I played the game in 2018, and so I played Queen d7. And after d3, e5, the position just is already better for black, because it's kind of like we've got a good Scotch game with colors reversed, and we're just going to pawn storm and just attack the white king. I mean, I kind of wish I'd actually played f5 and been a little more aggressive here, but in the game I played the move knight e7 instead. At the time I didn't have as much experience playing the opening then as I do now. I didn't have that same comfort level. And I think from here, there's where the game maybe isn't so relevant, because instead of bishop f3, I think I should have just played the move takes and knight a5, just switching to a positional approach, where we blockade their pawn majority and we're just ready to go for the attack with our bishop pair and space advantage. So that was the third game I wanted to share. With that, let's move on to the fourth one. This was against a player Singularidad Ordinaria in Chess24. And this was where I actually came up with this sort of creative system I started playing, seeing sort of Sergei Tivyakov play it. And that was basically just playing c6 followed by bishop g4, just kind of delaying the move knight f6 just to kind of reduce the theoretical workload. And this is stuff, by the way, that I do cover in my course as well, just so you know. Again, less than 24 hours to get it. But yeah, basically we can see that I just sort of played normal moves, and my opponent really should play the move of d4 and get the bishop on f4 if they do want to get a bit of an edge out of the opening. And as I kind of point out in my course, black should probably play something like queen to c7, and that's one way to play it, to kind of like meet bishop f4 with bishop d6 as an alternative to just letting him play the move bishop to f4. Although even this position, you can still kind of make it work as black, but white does have a little bit of a small edge if they do play correctly from this point as such. But anyway, moving on to the actual game, my opponent played the more passive d3. And it's a pattern you're going to notice with a lot of these games, is that my opponents, even though they're quite strong players, they just weren't really ready for the Scandinavian, just because it's not an opening that comes up very often. And you can sort of see that I was just more comfortable in the arising middle games. Like here, black has already basically equalized. This queen g5 doesn't really do a whole lot. In fact, if anything, white has only really misplaced the queen in a position like this one. And yeah, with white losing a lot of tempi, like black can already fight for an advantage. And I mean, there's moves like queen b2 that I could have played. I also could have played knight g4. That would have been quite a strong one. The way I played the game was admittedly not the best. So I kind of let white off the hook and allowed them to have quite a reasonable position. But in the end, they kind of made some mistakes later, where I was sort of able to, get at some of their weaknesses and eventually win the game. Like they kind of just, blundered like this, where I was able to, to win the pawn on b4 next move, and that eventually converted into a victory as such. So that was, I think, the fourth game. We're kind of losing count here, but we press on anyway. Now, game 5 was also on Chess24 against a player with the username Plumal, rated to 786, and in this game I just kind of went for the setup that destroys players below 2200, and if you're a more advanced player, you'll definitely want to remember this move of Queen to F5 here, because with Queen F5 this actually is a very tricky move for White, where in the game I kind of misplayed a little bit. I didn't know the theory that well at the time, and I played this natural knight to F6. But actually, if I had played the move of bishop F3 instead with the trick of knight D4, Black would actually be doing fairly well. And it's funny, I was actually playing against the Hierarch's chess engine quite recently, just on my mobile phone. And I actually ended up kind of getting this position after Queen E4, where I was just able to just make a very easy draw against the Hierarch's engine, just playing pretty natural moves as it kind of turns out here. But you also have other moves like C5 is also an alternative that's a bit sharper, which I do cover in my course. But yeah, knight F6 is not as precise because after knight C3, like I kind of realized I messed up the move order, and so I tried to play it in a second way, but I kind of messed it up and missed this move of Queen B3, and I still managed to win the game anyway, but not really because of the opening. So much just just avoid that. Just make sure you find this knight D4 trick, and as long as you know that, you'll get at the very least equality out of the opening. Now moving on to some of my other games, game 6 was won against a player afternoon on Chess24, 2018, and I sort of played this delayed knight F6 up, which I had sort of developed as just a way to kind of play just to avoid theory and avoid my opponent's preparation. Because at this time when I was playing this game, I was still a professional chess player, so I didn't want to give away my real weapons online. It turns out h3 is the best move, actually, just gambiting the pawn, but it's also a move that very few of my opponents actually played correctly. Whereas in this game, my opponent just developed quietly, but what ended up happening was that I just ended up getting a very comfortable position out of the opening, and the way this one played out actually reminds me a lot of the Nepo Carlsen game that I showed in an earlier YouTube video of the top 10 crushing Scandinavian wins. Obviously, we don't want to let them, just win our bishop, so we played a move 97 to deal with that. And after f4, I want to pass it over to you. I probably should have played the move of knight g6, and then I would still have had, a very small advantage to work with the bishop pair in space. Though they do have this backward pawn a3 that does partly compensate for it, like the position does become, very much in the style of a Slav where black should still be okay. But I want to give this one to you as a bit of a puzzle. What would be your move as black in this position when they overextend with pawn to f4? The answer here is that we have a very good move of queen to b4. Now, there are other moves like knight d5, knight e4, b5 that are all fine for black as well, but the move of queen b4 is really where it's at, where we're hitting the pawn, we're threatening to take the knight, then the bishop. And after bishop b3, I played a move knight e4, which is technically okay, but I kind of wish that I'd played like knight e5 instead and, just had this sort of position, because I think that this is kind of a better version of that idea, and, you also just get a very nice kind of Caracan / French where your bishop is just so active, and, white's position just doesn't really gel that well at this point, so yeah, that would have been quite good, and I didn't end up playing that way, but I still went on to win the game anyhow, where my opponent just kind of self-destructed and just made it very easy for me to convert my extra pawn in the end. So that was how I won against Afternoon. Moving on to the next game, game 7. This one against Asclepius was one where I think I might have slightly messed up the opening at some point, but let's have a closer look. Like at this time, I was really playing c6 and bishop g4 as my main system in the Caracan. And in this case, my opponent again played quite passively. Like I've noticed that most players, in general, when they are surprise opening, they also revert to trying to play something solid and safe. And that's something we can really take advantage of. Yeah, my e6 move wasn't the most precise. I should have played knight d7 in order to avoid white's next move of knight e5, and that would have just given me a fine position out of the opening with, normal moves from there. And if they play h3, you can either play bishop h5 or you can play the move of bishop f3. Like, they're both fairly similar in strength, so it depends on whether you want to, accept a position with white having the bishop pair in a kind of Fort Knox style, or whether you would rather play like bishop h5 and, keep the tension and, risk a move of g4, but saying it's not that big of a problem in a sense. But yeah, my opponent, to their credit, did find the move of knight e4, which is a little bit of an annoying move here. Like if they play Queen E2, they actually get very good compensation for the pawn with the attack if we do take on D4. But my opponent, yeah, didn't really realize that in the game, and after knight E2, I was just able to equalize very comfortably, like this Queen C7, Bishop D6, just a way to play a little more ambitiously. Bishop G3, obviously not really an ideal move either. And even though it's a very simplified position, it is a position where there is a lot of scope to play for a win. Where I realized that, again, these Scandinavian endgames tend to be quite good for black. I was moving this rook's pawn just a way to create some chances, just steadily building up the position, just grabbing space on the flanks. And yeah, I mean, at this point, a move like b5 is a move I might have gone for if I had the position today, because it just seems very natural to just get this blockade. But in the game, I went for c5 and, kind of got this nice blockade in this way, whereas it's very hard for my opponent really to defend everything. And, with how the game played out, I eventually, managed to set up so much pressure that he wasn't really able to cover everything. And, in the end, like this pawn ending probably should be a draw if he plays it correctly, but he kind of messed up and allowed me to, get that passed pawn that would win me the game. So yeah, that was this game. This is quite a also fun little breakthrough at the end, just to be able just to win with the passes. But anyway, moving on to the next game because I spent a little bit of time on this one, let's say. But next game was also against Asclepius actually, and this was one where he was so annoyed of my knight f3 bishop g4 that I played the last couple of games to actually play the move of g3 just to try to avoid it. And it's honestly not that stupid of a move order in all fairness. I will say though, if you do try to play g3 here, that bishop g4 is a pretty strong reply, which kind of thwarts the whole bishop f4 plan, as I talk about a bit in my course. But after g3, I played the move bishop f5 like I was still trying to play it sort of creatively and still try to get some value out of delaying the move of knight f6, just trying to be a little bit annoying. If my opponent ignores this attack and plays just bishop d3, just sacrificing the pawn for the attack, I think white is just doing pretty well there. But instead, he kind of fell into the bluff a bit, like he bought my bluff, and the result was that in this position, I think black's just doing fine. I mean, queen a5 was a little bit unnecessary to let him play the move of b4. I should have just gone queen b6 and just developed normally from there. But when my opponent kind of missed the chance to sort of punish my move order, I just ended up getting this totally fine endgame. Again, I probably wish I'd gone 95 and, got a bit of an initiative going in the center, but instead I castled and, still the position ended up being fine for me anyway, where I was able to, just get some very nice pressure against the d4 pawn. And, we actually played c3 and just gave up the exchange, which was not so hard for me to convert. But also after bishop e3, we can kind of see how we can just pick off that d4 pawn and just have a really big advantage. And that's a common problem for white in the Scandinavian, that in a lot of cases their d4 pawn will come under fire, and we will be able to sort of exploit that if they don't play it well in the middle game, or even in the late opening for that matter. But yeah, moving on to our next game. And this is like game 9 out of 17, so we're kind of at the halfway point here. And this one, yeah, I kind of played the same system I've been showing before, and it's one nice thing about these online games, you kind of get to see the ideas a lot more clearly, and they're also arguably a bit more indicative of what your opponents might play as well. Again, it's sort of true that in this particular line, it's probably more precise to play knight d7 before the move e6, but really it doesn't matter all that much. Like if they play h3, we do have ideas of even just grabbing the pawn if we really want to, just playing to develop solidly and consolidate from there. But in the game, he played knight e4, and he's trying to activate the pieces to make his pawns more mobile. But once again, the point that comes up so often in Scandinavian is how the exchange of the minor pieces is just quite good for us. We're threatening a little cheapo with bishop h2, so they play h3 to get out of it. Bishop h5, rook e1, I just castle, and I mean, bishop g6 probably isn't the most precise. Like, actually, the move of f5 was a bit of a strong opportunity I kind of missed to just really mess up their structure. But even with not missing this chance, the position in the game was still quite fine for me. Where I played this quite important move of c5. This is the break you normally want to play in the middle game to challenge white's Scandinavian center. And then what happens is you just get this position with the queenside majority, which I do cover a very large number of examples of how to play these sort of structures in my course. Which I think about, like, it's not just going to teach you how to win with a Scandinavian, but it's actually just going to make you a much better chess player, period. And I'm not going to go through the rest of the game, but I kind of end up just sort of just grinding out this position for a very long time and just eventually, winning a knight endgame, just leveraging my majority on the king side to create some chances. But yeah, that was the idea I wanted to share with this game. Like, it was only move 14 already. I had a chance to just get a gigantic advantage against a 2800 blitz player on chess 24. Now for the next game, this one I played against a player of the username Cookie 2015 on chess 24, and this time I actually played a bit of a different setup. Like, instead of the queen d6 we saw in the past games, I decided to mix it up and play the move queen a5 for a little bit of variety, and I played it in the Smurden style, just all the way that Smurden had shown me a decade ago with bishop f5, just going for like e6 and playing flexibly in that way. Also, the move a6 is kind of an interesting one. Also, going for this up is kind of a possibility that I think we'll see in one of the other games later on. But yeah, for this one, I just played it very normally. It is true in this version, white does have the option of d3 to kind of kill our bishop, which is sort of why I mentioned the other plan. In the Moran style is a bit of an alternative, but once he plays d4, like, you're obviously pretty comfortable when they're not able to find a good pawn break to use their lead in development. I just played the move queen c7, just getting out of any discovered attacks on our queen. Rook e1, bishop e7. Kind of wish I'd played knight d7 now, actually, just to have the option of maybe putting the bishop on d6. I think I played a little bit too lazily here. Because there are moves like knight for you to have to sort of watch out for a little bit in these positions, trying to go after your bishop pair. That's what I do show how to deal with him in my course, where I play the bishop g4 will often be a good reply to leave their knight a little bit sidelined here. But when they play knight e5, yeah, we're just able just to liquidate the position and just have a very comfortable middle game. I kind of wish I'd played queen b6 now, but queen d7 is actually fine as well. And yeah, I mean, I did sort of miss the move of bishop to c2 and bishop g4. Like, that was a little bit embarrassing. Like, I must have had a real off day not to see, either of these two moves. Actually, I think I know what happened. Yeah, I spent 6 exiles moves. Yeah, this was just a really bad game by me, but even playing really, really badly, I still managed to defeat my opponent. Because that's the nice thing about the Scandinavian. It will often give you more than one chance in the game, as it turns out. But yeah, that was this one, and again, so obviously, yeah, my opponent's really struggling to deal with these systems. Actually, our next game, and this is the 11th game. Like, now we're going to see the games I played on. We're going to see the games I played on chess.com, because at some point I started to play more on chess.com than on chess 24. I'd say around about 2018, 2019 or so. And this game was one I played against Obsidian Destroyer. This was a bullet game that I played, and at this time I was like 2776 bullet, and this guy was 2896 bullet, so I was outrated by over 100 points. But I played this a6 move as a little bit of a surprise, which I did include as a bonus video just a day or two ago, actually, in Play the Strongest Scandinavian in 2025. Like, I included when I counted, it was like 20 updates. It was just, actually, it wasn't even 20, it was actually more than 20 if you include like some of the bonus videos and stuff I added here as well on YouTube. But yeah, my opponent didn't know this move of g3, which is what they should play. He played the move h3, being afraid of this bishop g4, knight f6, but the thing is I can still put my bishop on f5, and this is still a pretty decent square for the prelate. The game continued, and I realized it was a bullet game, so I'll go for a little bit quickly, but you can kind of see that I was able just to equalize just with very natural moves. Like, there's nothing super complicated about the moves that I played here. I do think knight c6, even though it's not that bad of a move, I do think bishop f4 would have been maybe slightly annoying for me to deal with. Like, the fact our knight is a little stuck does mean white may have a very small advantage in a position like this. But yeah, I could also play queen c6. I mean, that also would have been a viable alternative going for, this kind of setup instead. But once he plays c4, though, I'm reasonably happy. I did miss a little bit of a chance with f5 to kind of disrupt their bishop f4 move a bit. So yeah, castling long was immediately not the best move here. But fortunately for me, my opponent didn't really play it in the best way either. Like, he played b3, and it sort of allowed me to get at least a little bit of pressure against the d4 pawn, which is a very common theme in this opening. And, the rest of the game I probably won't cover so much. Like, what happened was that, I kind of gave my opponent a chance for d5, which I sort of realized the instant I made the move. But if I'd played a move like h6 instead and just kind of built up a bit more steadily, say with moves like, queen e7, maybe and counterplay on the king's side, well, then white would have only had the faintest of edges in this position. But yeah, I ended up going on to win later anyway after I think my opponent sort of like blundered some, like he ended up like winning the exchange, but I was sort of able to trick him later in the end game. But anyway, it's not the most relevant for our theme what happened after this position. So moving on to our the final our 12th game here. This was one that I played against a Lithuanian GM, Pultus Polnavicius. And actually, this was one where I played the move of Queen A5. And I mean, my opponent played this in a bit of a weird way. Like, it's clear when he plays F4, he was just trying to, avoid Fury and just sort of experiment, but the experiment kind of backfired in a way. And I wasn't really sure what to play, but I just felt that G6 was kind of a move that would, just give me a very solid position and just make it hard for him to really attack. And it turns out actually Black already is fighting for an advantage where I didn't, see this move of C5 and, setting up a little bit of a cheap fork if they take here. Probably I was nervous about D5, but you do get quite good pressure against the center as it turns out. But I played Bishop G4, which is also perfectly fine here. After Queen E1, I just felt that this sort of attack just wasn't really going to be sound when the center is so wide open. Like that's the big difference between this position and let's say the Grand Prix attack of the Sicilian. And so with Bishop F3 and Knight C6, it just becomes very hard for white to defend the pawn. After Knight G4, Rook D1, and Rook D8, it's just already kind of hard to know what white should really do. Actually, I kind of missed a little bit of a chance. I actually should have flicked in Queen B4 and only then Rook D8, so that then D5 I would have been able to meet with, just grabbing the piece. But yeah, even with misplaying it a bit, I still ended up having a pretty big advantage, and I did go on to beat my opponent, who has had a blitz rating of 2759 at the time this game in 2020. So another sort of high profile victory for me in this one. Yeah, moving on to the next game. This was a 3-minute blitz game I played against a username of Inner Emptiness, and it was yet another example of me playing this A6 move in 2020. I was kind of inspired by some games that Magnus Carlsen had played with this in the year of 2020. It inspired me to start playing it myself as a bit of a surprise weapon. But the thing is, 95 isn't as effective here as against C6 by comparison, because we have this Knight C6 to attack their pawn. And also, if they play Bishop F4, we can go Bishop F5 and get quite good play that way, as I show in my course. But in the game after Knight C6, Black's just very comfortable, where the pawn on D5 is a bit of a target. We have very good development, and, the move of E6 probably is objectively the most reliable one. My guess is I just didn't want to get a very simplified position against a lower rated player, but it does turn out Black does have a fairly decent advantage to work with at this point with the more active pieces. But I end up being a bit more creative and playing B3, which, technically turns out to be fine as well. Like A3 is a little bit of a wasted tempo in my opinion, and, I was able to actually just grab a pawn, and I'm not going to show every single move of the game, but basically I was able to, kind of consolidate my extra pawn and, eventually win from this position. And, H5 is always a fun move to get to play, just to throw the pawn to king and attack him. And, like, what happened was I basically just sort of gave back the extra pawn, but just had the better position just with some, problems with white structure. And it is a common theme that that the middle games, that, like, there's more pieces get traded as you get close to the end game. It just kind of gets, better and better for the Scandinavian player. I won't go through the rest of the game, but that's just to show you, like, how I was able to just basically win a pawn out of the opening and just have a very good position with black against a 2794 blitz player on chess.com. Now for the next chess.com game, this was one that I played against a player, Twitch LM Blitz, who I remember is nowadays a Norwegian Grandmaster, but obviously wasn't quite that strength back then, but still, 2755 Blitz. And this was one where I sort of played this move of E5, so I'd come a long way since the game I played 15 years was against Justin Huang as a junior. Now, to my opponent's credit, he did find a good move in Knight F3, and yeah, I decided just to play it very solidly, just Queen E6, and even though the position is very symmetrical, it is still quite dynamic with the opposite side castling. And in this Freemare game, I was able to create some pressure. I mean, I kind of wish I'd played Knight F6 and maybe kept my options open a bit more for the bishop. But I decided to play Bishop B4 just way to potentially create some imbalance in the position. And I mean, at this point, I think the game maybe isn't so relevant. Like, I don't really like the move of 95 that I played, which I think is a bit of a basic mistake for for the level I was at at the time of the game, I should just play knight f6 and then I would just be, would just be totally fine in this position here. It's our piece just developed very actively as usual. But yeah, the game maybe loses a bit of its relevance, but still shows how I was able to very comfortably equalize. My opponent just wasn't really ready for this, for the Scandinavian as it turned out. Now, the last two games I want to share were both played in 2021 on chess.com. This one was played against MI Terrible, and so basically I'd already created the initial play the strongest Scandinavian course at the time I played this game, and that's how I knew against this d3 setup that the move a6 is quite a nice way to get reasonable chances and sort of exploit the fact that White has not put the pawn on d4 as it were. White probably should play the move bishop d2 if they want to fight for an advantage, but I still think that a position like this is just still going to be completely fine for Black. Like our development is just so fluid from this point, in very much in the Moran semi-Slav style. He played queen e2 instead, and I decided to play e6 and sort of, just be a little bit more flexible, but what we kind of see here is that I just have a very comfortable position out of the opening, and I'd argue I probably could have even played a better move order, but I was still able to get my moves on the board, like knight d7, just keep the tension, and the position here is equal, but I do think it's a little bit easier to play Black somehow, because their bishop is just a little bit stuck in this kind of pawn structure. I decided just to keep the tension with rook c8, knight d2. I found a very nice move, queen f5 to just annoy their bishop a bit. Not sure if I would have played knight d5. I think knight h5 and grabbing the bishop here probably makes a bit more sense in hindsight, but in the end, I kind of just sort of shuffled the piece around to sort of let him get quite low on time. Because I remember, that my opponent was spending a lot more time than I was on each move in this from memory. And I was sort of able to set up so that, this exchange, I was able to just kind of build up the position. It turns out that probably, this wasn't like the highest quality game on my part, but it was still good enough to end up eventually like winning the game where, he played this overly passive rook b1 move that, kind of allowed me to, start making some progress. Like I got into c5 and I was able, just to kind of have a big advantage and eventually win. Like, probably I should just go bishop d4. I think the game maybe lose a little bit of its relevance from this point. A position like this would clearly give Black some very strong pressure and leave both White's bishops rather inept at this point. But that was sort of a game on show. I was able just to kind of steadily outplay a strong international master who I think at that time was like one of the like top 100 to 150 players in the world on the chess.com blitz. Actually, probably more like top 100. So that was quite a nice win to get on the board. And the final game that I'll share, I mean, this one I can kind of skip over, like it wasn't a very good quality game, like it was against Alexei Spitsin, but my opponent just basically just made a bit of a basic mistake, and they just like blundered a pawn right out of the opening. Ended up like playing this game really badly and then swilling the opponent later, but those were the games I wanted to share with the Scandinavian, and as you can see, there's, a few different ways of playing it, but up till the year of 2021, it was a system where I was sort of getting pretty good positions out of the opening, where most of my opponents were just not really ready for it at all, and so I was just, having quite good results with it for the most part. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Do make sure to comment below, like, what was your favorite game that I played here, or, if you don't have a favorite game, what was a move that you saw here that you really liked? Do let us know in the comments below. And just a final reminder here that the Play the Strongest Scandinavian in 2025 course, that the price will be going up by $50 in less than 24 hours. Actually, it'll probably almost be like within 18 hours of me publishing this video on YouTube. So do make sure to check the link in the description below just to make sure you don't miss out on that. Like there's already I think like 90 plus sort of lessons in the course. So like that few like if you basically took each video like and you took the price, you'd basically be getting it for price about like $1 per training video, which is obviously a an absolute bargain when coming from a grandmaster especially. So make sure to get that and enjoy that, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.